Ask an Astronomer here as usual with our astronomer. That is Marley Leacock. Hey, Marley, how's it going?
It's good. It's late in the day. This feels weird.
Absolutely. This is a brand new time. If this is your first time joining us for Ask an Astronomer, we are here every second Thursday. This is the first Thursday of the new year, where we do a 30-minute show. We've got a theme, but we can answer any of your questions, or Marley's going to answer your questions. I'll just make up something funny. And we're going to do this all year. We are live. Marley and I are on site on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. It's almost sunset here. It was a bit of a rainy day here, but like I said, this is a brand new time, 4 p.m. at Pacific time. But Happy New Year, Marley. It is the new year. It is just past perihelion, the astronomer's new year last week. Did you do anything to celebrate?
No. I think I was here. I don't know. Yeah.
Of course, perihelion is the place that the Earth is furthest from the sun, even though
No,
it certainly
closest.
That's what I meant. I meant closest to the sun. So this is
Yes.
why you get the questions and I don't answer the questions, because my brain always flips things. But for this episode, we are going to preview all of the big stories of 2023. So if you have any questions, put them into the YouTube chat. If you're in telescopic watching, you want to answer, or you want your question answered, you can come into YouTube, perhaps on Facebook. You can put a question in there, or if you're watching this afterwards, put your questions on afterwards, and we'll try to answer them after the fact. But Marley, we've got some stories we want to look ahead to. One of the things is that when I opened up YouTube to get our show up and running, one of the first things that came up was like, there's a brand new comet that you can go out and you can see. So why don't we start right there with our big story of 2023, which is the comet that is visible in our skies right now.
Yes, this comet does not have a fun name. It's Comet C/2022 E3ZTF, or just Comet C/2022 E3. Yeah, I guess it just has to do with where it was discovered and when it was discovered is what those numbers mean. But it was discovered in March of 2022. Actually, it was spotted just after Jupiter's orbit when we first saw it. It's classified as a hyperbolic comet. So often what I've seen in the questions I've gotten is like, oh, this is a super rare comet. We're never going to see it again. And that's kind of true. There's something to do with orbits called how elliptical or how eccentric they are. And so something with 0 eccentricity is a perfect circle. Something with the eccentricity 1 is like very oval, squished. And then in between, you have orbits that our planets are on, like varying squishinesses of circles. But a hyperbolic orbit is when the eccentricity is over 1. And so what this does is it kind of creates a open orbit, and it's more of a slingshot. So this, comet may actually end up leaving our solar system, never to be seen again. If it were on a closed orbit, its orbit would be 50,000 years. So either way, we're not going to see it again, at least not you or I. And its closest approach is on February 1st. For us here in Vancouver. It will be visible all night. It will be quite dim though. So it's only supposed to get as bright or maybe dimmer as the star Polaris, which is already very difficult to see inside of the city. Mm-hmm. So you're going to want to definitely get out of the city and into probably a dark sky area. That being said, it is February in Vancouver, so there's a good chance of clouds either way. But where to look for it in the sky, it'll be close to the North Celestial Pole. So using Polaris as a marker will help a lot in trying to find where it is. It kind of sticks around that area. And I've seen, people say, oh, it's a rare green comet. If you're to look at it with your naked eye, it wouldn't really appear green. That green color really comes through from long exposure photographs or long exposure looking at it for quite a long time is when you get those stacked images on top of each other and the green comes through. Really, to your naked eye, it looks kind of just like a smudge on the sky. It really looks like someone's just smudged the stars in a way. But that green color comes from a specific type of molecule that makes up the head of the comet. It's called dicarbon. So two carbons like stuck together is what that is causing that green. But very cool if you're able to see it for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if you were able to see Comet Neowise. It was during the summer of 2020, I believe. And I was able actually to see it from Kitts Beach. One of the main reasons that we could is that because it was more sort of like northwest. I think in Vancouver, this one's going to be even trickier to see, especially in Vancouver, because north is kind of right over downtown Vancouver. So maybe if you go to North Vancouver, but we also got those mountains in the way as well. But certainly, I think like the darkest possible place to get to. And one of the tip that I realized is that when I was there at Kitts Beach with a bunch of other stargazers, is that the camera opening up the shutter and looking where you can see the comet with your naked eye is actually a good technique, because then you can actually see more detail, because the camera eye actually sees more than our actual eye, right? So when I was looking through some of my friends' cameras after they held the shutter open for about like 15, 20 seconds, then like the comet appeared, kind of not as good as this picture that you have here, but certainly a lot better than what we can see with our eyes.
Yeah, definitely a lot better. Our eyes can only collect so much light at once, and we blink very quickly, you know, so our shutter goes quite fast, but
awesome. Well, actually, on the topic of what we can see with our eyes, we've got our first question about a star that has been in the news. I haven't seen it in the news recently, but Betelgeuse. So a few years ago, Marley, I don't know if you remember, there was, you know, some talk of the variability in Betelgeuse, and of course, it's always in the talk of potentially going supernova at some point, because it is a red giant. But Steve says that he's been noticing some differences in observations of Betelgeuse. Have you heard anything more about what's going on with Betelgeuse?
No, the last I heard about Betelgeuse, when it was doing the dimming, it was, you know, very concerning. It was like, why it should be getting brighter, you know, confusion. And the last I heard about it was a team of astronomers. Their hypothesis as to why it had been dimming was because it had essentially like coughed out a chunk of itself of material.
No.
And that material had blocked out some of its own light. And so that's what that dimming was. And as that material dissipated, the brightness went back up to normal. But I haven't heard anything recently about Betelgeuse dimming again. That would be fun. But that could be what's causing it, if that is, because that was what happened before. So it's possible that it's happening again.
So is Betelgeuse a variable star?
No, it's not in the way that we define variable stars. Yeah.
All right. So that wasn't the actual reason for its previous dimming. It was more what you just said. It coughed up this material.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, Steve, keep observing and let us know what observations you're making. Let's move on to our next big story of the year. We will be talking, I think, a lot about the moon this year, Artemis and the moon. What is going on with our missions?
Sorry, no, I'm worried about this variable star thing, because I guess it does count as a variable star because it does change in brightness, but I had never heard it described as a variable star before. So when I think of variable stars, I think of something different, but I guess it does count as one, but I just had never called it that before.
Right. So I guess that is a bit of a semantic thing, because I guess like from our observations, if it's brightening and dimming, I guess that technically would be a variable star, but maybe there's another definition. Maybe that's what you were thinking of.
That's entirely possible. I'd have to look more in it. Okay. Sorry. The lunar missions. Yeah. So, looking ahead to 2023. So it's going to be a big year for the moon, really, for these lunar missions. There are several different countries that are going to the missions before, some who have never gone and some who are going again. So quite a few up and coming missions, one of them being SLIM, which is the smart lander for investigating the moon by the Japanese Space Agency. This is set to launch sometime in between January and March 2023. I do think it's been bumped to April, but there's been no consensus on that just yet. And it'll be a lander, and it's supposed to test new lunar lander techniques. So making sure they can get it right, land properly, and all of that. What's really interesting about this, though, is that I've noticed with, in particular, the Japanese Space Agency's missions, a lot of their missions end up being sample return missions. And so that's actually what this is paving the way for. So starting to test this technology, test their landing technology, so they can ultimately do a sample return mission from the moon, just like they did with some different asteroids that they've done. And then also what they're planning to do for their Martian moons mission, right? They want to land on the Martian moon Phobos and collect a sample and bring it back to Earth. And we're seeing this happening again now in prepping for this lunar mission with this SLIM lunar mission.
Yeah, it certainly seems like in the last few years, ever since NASA kind of refocused their future direction to the moon as opposed to Mars, there was that debate that kind of went back and forth. But ever since, that they've really focused on the moon being the next step for them, it seems like all of the other space agencies seem to have gotten on board as well. There seems to be a plethora of moon missions that are coming up in the next few years.
Yeah, and I guess like as different country space agencies develop themselves, right? A lot of them are quite young compared to NASA and the Russian space agency. As they develop, the moon is kind of like the logical next step, right? Like once you're able to get into the Earth's atmosphere, the next closest thing you could go for is the moon. And so it's a smart next step as opposed to like launching all of your stuff to Mars. But I have found a lot of the space agencies also kind of work their way to Mars eventually, right? Like JAXA is already working its way through Mars to Mars, the European Space Agency doing the same thing. So it's kind of it's a smart plan to go Earth, Moon, Mars, right? You never want to overshoot yourself. So it makes sense as to why they do it. But it is just like so many of them are going. And I think a lot of it also has to do with new commercial programs helping with space, and ride sharing and stuff just gives different space agencies more opportunities to go to space, like the Indian Space Research Organization with their Chandrayaan-3 mission. It'll be a follow-up to Chandrayaan-2 to show like end-to-end capabilities of safe landing and roving. So I think Chandrayaan-2 had some problems with the landing when it first went. And so Chandrayaan-3 is going to try to make sure that they can complete the safe landing and having a lunar rover going about the highlands near the lunar South Pole. And the lunar South Pole keeps coming up as well because that's where scientists have found the best place to search for water would be in terms of frozen ice or frost on the surface of the moon. I talked about last year, I think, in one of those Ask an Astronomers. And this mission will have a lot of different payloads like seismometers, heat flow experiments to see how heat moves through the lunar regolith, because days on the moon are very different, and also spectrometers to determine kind of what the landing site, what those rocks are made out of, and the components that make up that lunar regolith there.
Yeah, and obviously, and I was working and actually was live talking about Chandrayaan-2 when it failed, and it was a big deal for the Indian community. This is their biggest missions. They're a relatively new space agency, but these missions are a really big deal for these relatively newer agencies. There was a little bit of talk that after the failure that what's going to be next, but they have established they're going back, and these are going to be really exciting, and I'm really hoping that these missions go forward. It just is really inspiring for all of the other countries to refocus themselves on the moon.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the Indian Space Agency has also developed not necessarily entire missions, but a lot of different instruments as well that's been used on NASA missions and NASA orbiters, especially for the moon. So it doesn't surprise me that now that they continue to try to get their own spacecraft onto the moon.
Yeah, and as well as a whole bunch of private companies as well. So you've got a whole bunch of other missions, tinier missions that are going back to the moon, right?
Yeah, there's this was funny. This was funny to me. The Roscosmos wants to go back to the moon. This Luna 25, which brings it back to the Soviet Union era of lunar missions. They just are not renaming them at all, which I thought was fun.
I think that's great.
Yeah, so they're going to try to do a lander on the moon. Notoriously had a very hard time during the Apollo era of getting things to land on the moon. So they want to prove their lander technology and develop soil sampling technologies. And this one is different, as it'll last at least one Earth year on the surface, which is quite a long time. A long time to last on the moon for a proof mission, but I thought that was interesting for them. But yeah, there's a lot of private companies heading to the moon as well, and these two are coming from what NASA has called their Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program. So they help these companies get their things to the moon. They can kind of hitch a ride, but they have to carry like NASA payloads as part of the agreement and stuff, but it's part of outsourcing the cost, right? So the Peregrine mission through Astrobiotic will have 14 NASA and then 14 commercial payloads, and its primary missions kind of tend to be studying the lunar exosphere, studying the regolith and the radiation. And it should launch in the first quarter of 2023, so the next few months. And then the Nova C lander by Intuitive Machines will have 5 NASA payloads, 6 commercial payloads, and it will study space weather and lunar surface interactions. And this will launch no earlier than March 2023. But these two are like the first of their kinds of missions. But moving on, it's kind of like a carrier. So people, if they want to send experiments to the moon, or companies or scientists want to send experiments to the moon, they don't necessarily have to, grab a ride on a NASA lander. They could grab a ride on an Astrobiotic or a Intuitive Machines lander instead and get their payload delivered that way. So that's where this services program comes in. And then there's many other ones, I think, not just these, but I think there'll be 3 launches for commercial lunar payload type missions. So keep an eye out for them. But yeah, big year for the moon for sure.
Yeah, no, this is really big news because one of the other institutions that I support is the Canadian Satellite Design Challenge. So for the past like 5 or 6 years, like universities, now even high school students, have been involved in building CubeSats, and the university competition, which is actually really taking off in the States as well. One of their kind of like holdups was that after these university teams build their CubeSat that are meant to go out into space, potentially even go to the moon, but they didn't really have a ride there. So now it's going to open up a whole pathway of innovation for these young students to build something that actually go to the moon. I think this is an amazing opportunity by bringing down these costs and having private companies able to take these missions to the moon.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, it ties in a bit with other news coming later, but a lot of even like the launching being outsourced, right? So it's not necessarily a NASA spacecraft, right? It could be SpaceX spacecraft instead, taking them to the moon. So that's kind of fits into like an overarching NASA plan for the NASA responsibility, moving away from near Earth orbit and focusing on Mars, and then letting the private companies come in and kind of take that over from them.
Right. And of course, speaking of Canadians, there are 4 actual Canadians that are, one of them at least is going to go to the moon. So we'll be looking forward to the announcement. All 4 have been through our doors at some point. And you certainly met one last year, right, Marley?
Yes, I met Joshua Kutrick. He's fun. He's a guy. Yeah, he's funny. He's very nice. But yeah, one of these 4 astronauts will be on Artemis 2, and that announcement they said will come in 2023. They gave no more information than that, just 2023. So at any time, it'll be announced who the Canadian will be on the Artemis 2, and along with the rest of the crew, which I think is going to be all NASA astronauts. I don't think an ESA astronaut is making it onto that one, but we will find out who those people will be sometime this year, which I think is the most exciting part. I don't know. I just want to know who it's going to be so bad. I've been waiting for so long.
Being an astronaut is a lesson in patience, right? Like you get selected to be an astronaut and you may wait almost half your life before you actually go to space.
Yeah, you wait a long. I mean, they get to do stuff in between. Like often they're Capcom, so they are the person that the people in the ISS talk to in Houston, right? They talk to their astronaut buddies. But I would think that they would all be very eager to go to space, except David has already gone, but the rest of them would be very excited to go to space, I'm sure. And David, I'm sure maybe wants to go again.
Yeah. I've been watching I didn't watch it when it first came out. I just watched the first episode of For All Mankind. I don't know if anyone out there has seen.
You just started. It's good.
I just started, yeah. Thinking about the Luna Russian program. No spoilers, but throw into the chat if you've seen For All Mankind and what you think of it. Let's go on. We've got about 12 more minutes before the end of the show, so we've got some more highlights that we want to get to for 2023. What do you got for us?
Yes, so the JUICE mission will launch. This is very fun. I'm excited about it because I am excited about Jupiter, and more specifically its moons. It's supposed to launch between the 5th and the 25th of April. That's when its launch window opens. It has a lot of primary targets. Really, it'll be studying the Jovian system as a whole, right? So studying the Galilean moons, especially Ganymede, Europa, Callisto, Io. Ganymede seems to be the main target for the moons. It's the only moon to have an intrinsic magnetic field. So it has its own magnetic field, which is very odd. And it's quite large as well for a moon. So studying it and how it works and how it interacts with Jupiter is a big part of JUICE's mission. It'll also look at the habitability of the Jovian system, which ties right into Ganymede, Europa, and Callisto and their oceans, right? So these are icy moons, and scientists are pretty confident that underneath that thick shell of ice, there's an underwater ocean. And we see that in oceans on Earth, deep down at the bottom, hydrothermal vents can be places that support some type of life. It's odd looking, but it's there. So studying that as well. And the impact of Jupiter's environment on its moons and vice versa, the tidal flexing, all of that stuff, the intensity of Jupiter's magnetic field impacting the moons. And then my favorite part, which was, what are gas giants anyway? Like, how do they form? How did Jupiter form? How will it evolve? How would it have changed throughout its life as it was becoming a planet? Which I think is just a fun question to ask. Just what is going on over there? So that'll be a great mission. I mean, it'll launch in 2023. It won't reach Jupiter until much later, but it'll be fun to actually see it like get on its way and get going.
Yeah, certainly, for us, launches don't end up being like big stories. I mean, they are, of course, in the space community, because you're not going to do anything until you get a successful launch. But it's not until it actually reaches its destination that the public really becomes aware of the mission. So what kind of time frame are we looking at here? If it does launch in April, when is it going to arrive at Jupiter?
Oh, I think it was watch me get it wrong. 2029, I think, is when it'll arrive in. Nope, 2031. I got it wrong. Yes, it will be a different mission is 2029. That's why. It'll arrive in Jupiter in 2031. So a while, but I mean, it would never get there if we never launched it.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Can you imagine like working on that mission and like gearing up for the launch, and like you've launched and then you don't actually get there for another 7 to 9 years?
I actually met a woman who had worked on the Voyager mission, and she was like, that's why I still have a job. Like, she had started when Voyager launched and was still working on it as it was leaving the solar system. And she was like, no, it's been my whole life, essentially. And I was like, that's job security. That's what that is.
It literally has been my whole life, because it launched when I was born. But let's move on to Psyche, which is another really cool mission going to an asteroid.
Yes, this one, this was a big thing a couple months ago, because it almost got canceled. The entire Psyche mission almost got canceled due to it missed its 2022 window. They weren't ready. And then there was an internal review as to why they weren't ready and whether or not they were even going to continue, or if it was possible to continue with the mission. And ultimately it was, but it did come a bit too close to being scrapped for my liking, because it's a very cool mission. The asteroid Psyche, we think, is mostly made out of metal. And in fact, scientists think that it might be the core of a planetesimal, which is a very young planet. So like Earth, we have that iron nickel core. They think that this is the core of a planet that never fully formed, right?
That's
so
very cool.
A planetesimal would have separated internally to have a rocky mantle and that iron core. And then something happened, some violent activity happened to get rid of all of that mantle, leaving the core behind. So it'd be fun to study, because it'd be fun to, I don't know, find an asteroid that's just entirely iron, which would be very cool. Or if it is, the interior of a planet that never was, it helps us understand planetary formation a bit better and how planets like Earth are able to form as well. This one is the one that we'll get there in 2029. So that's why I was confused, but that should get there in 2029. It should reach Psyche.
Yeah, and then of course, when you compare a metal asteroid like Psyche to another very different mission, and it seemed like a very different kind of asteroid, and that was asteroid Bennu, which Osiris Rex is finally going to return with that sample.
Yes, I'm very excited for this. I don't know. It's just, I love when we bring things back, I guess, but it's so difficult to do, which I think is why I admire it so much. Also, because it's been so long. Osiris Rex left Bennu May 10th, 2021, right? So it's already been, it'll be 2 years by the time it returns with this sample. And so right now it's just kind of coasting Osiris Rex, and starting in July 2023, they'll perform a series of maneuvers to start to bring it closer and closer to Earth. They have to do this very carefully, because when the spacecraft releases the sample, the container that the sample is in to return to Earth, it has to be very precise. They have to get it at the exact right speed and the exact right angle. Any higher of an angle and the sample will skip off the atmosphere and not return to Earth at all, and too low of an angle and it will burn up in the atmosphere. So the entire work of this team trying to get the sample back will just go up in flames, right? So it's very precise, very difficult, but they're looking for, I think the date for it to come back is September 24th, 2023 still. And it'll land using parachutes, like the sample container has parachutes, and it'll land in Utah, in the Great Salt Lake Desert at the Air Force's training range. And it'll be fun, but that's what I'm most excited for. I think aside from knowing who the astronaut is going to be, this is the mission I'm the most excited for.
Okay. All right. So stay tuned for Ask an Astronomer edition in late September when that comes back. And what's really cool is that Katherine Johnson, who works out at UBC, and her team have been working on the Osiris mission. So hopefully once they get the sample back and start to do some analysis, we can bring somebody here for an event. We can delve into some of those results.
Yeah, I want to know. That's so cool.
All right. So our final stories, of course, are getting to what we kind of alluded to, which was the commercial side of the industry. But this is another side of that commercial side of space exploration. And that is some new companies getting into the game.
Yeah, so this has been in the works for a while. This Starliner capsule flight. So this is through Boeing, and it's it's a capsule that will hold astronauts inside of them. So not having to rely on the Dragon or the Soyuz capsules anymore, adding a third one into the rotation. And this was supposed to go ahead in February, but there's lingering tech problems that have to be fixed. And so it's been pushed back to April 2023, and it'll be taking a specific crew of astronauts to the International Space Station. So I think this crew has just been pushed back, waiting to go to the space station. So exciting to see when this goes. It was able to successfully dock with the space station when they did an uncrewed test, but there were some problems, I think, with undocking. And so that is bad. And so they're still trying to work out all of those technical issues they're having. And then, of course, there's Starship through SpaceX. And I feel like I've been talking about this one for so long when people come in and ask me about it. The orbital maiden flight for Starship. So what Starship actually is the whole thing is referred to as Starship, but it's this second part up top.
The black part?
The top part, the upper stage is called Starship. And then this metal part is the super heavy first stage. That's like the bulk of the rocket, is that stage. This was also supposed to go ahead, I think, this month, but now it's looking like March is when it's going to go ahead, is most likely. And Starship will carry people and cargo to the moon and Mars. So this is a super heavy lift vehicle, right? So it's going to go further than the space station and get people and cargo to much more distant places. And it's also designed to be fully reusable, which is great and very cool. The prototype they're currently testing for the super heavy, that first stage, is called Booster 7. And they want to test all 33 engines at once before they put it up. And they've currently, I think, simultaneously tested 14 of them. So they're still trying to get all of them running at the same time and testing that and seeing the data come in from how the booster operates like that. But it'll hopefully go up soon. It'll be nice when it goes up. I think they've been contracted out to help with a lot of the lunar missions as well, the future Artemis missions and stuff like that, as well as the Martian missions have been in talks with NASA. So it'll be exciting to see this start and this start to get developed as well.
Okay, well, there you go. Those are the stories to look ahead to in 2023. But as always, as every year always happens, there's always some surprises, things that come up. So stay tuned and make sure that you tune in to Ask an Astronomer every second Thursday. We did get got a few more questions that we're going to answer here before we end off the show. So we're going to go back to Steve about a very big question, which of course is the edge of the universe. Any updates on how fast the edge of the universe is traveling away from us? Is it faster than the speed of light? Is it the speed of light? What is the speed of the edge of the universe going away from us?
So I'm guessing you mean the edge of like the observable universe? Yeah. So that, I don't think it can go faster than the speed of light, if I'm remembering everything properly. I feel like what you're asking me is, what is the Hubble constant at that distance? Like, what is the Hubble constant? Like the rate of expansion at that distance? And I honestly don't know, but I do not think it's the speed of light. That is feels too fast. I think the Hubble constant at one redshift, the one value I know, it's like 70 megaparsecs per something, which is not the speed of light, but it's still fast. But I don't think it's the speed of light. No.
Well,
I don't have an update.
And it's interesting that you bring up redshift, Marley, because that is actually going to be our theme for February. We are using red in space, which we are going to be talking a lot about that expansion, because that's what redshift is. We're going to have a whole episode dedicated to that on February 23rd. This being the beginning of the year, it's actually a new year in different cultures. So our very next episode, January 26th, is the Chinese New Year. So we're going to have a Chinese New Year themed year of the rabbit, I believe it is this this year. So we're going to bring on a special guest that will be announced very soon for that. And of course, a whole bunch of great events we got coming up, including next Thursday in person, all about the multiverse. The tickets are almost all sold out. So if you have not got a ticket for next Thursday, we've got Douglas Scott from UBC that is going to be joining Marley and I in the planetarium for a very cool show about the multiverse. What is it? Well, we've got some different things we're going to talk about. You see it a lot in pop culture, but we're actually going to delve into what it actually is and what astronomers are talking about when you hear things like the multiverse and many worlds interpretation. I wanted to end off with one comment from YouTube from Dominic Sicoli, but I guess perhaps a young person in their life, Kristen, who's 9 years old, loves space, wants to be an astronomer when they grow up, and they want to volunteer at the Space Center. So, Kristen, we are going to reach out to you, and we're going to figure out something that you can do maybe for one of our family events. It's going to be a great year, Marley. Excited to work with you on all these events, and excited to see all of you out there on YouTube. We will see you again in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone.